Ever wondered what would happen if a bunch of outlaws decided to build their own country? Well, it actually happened. In the heart of the sunny Caribbean, on an island called New Providence, a group of sailors, castaways, and rebels created a nation that would become the stuff of legend, the Pirate Republic of Nassau. This wasn't just a hideout. It was a real-life experiment in radical democracy, a place built by pirates for pirates. So, how did this rogue nation come to be? Let's rewind to the early 1700s. The seas were a tough place to make a living. If you were a sailor in the Royal Navy or on a merchant ship, life was brutal. The pay was terrible, the food was worse, and the discipline was downright cruel. You could be flogged for the smallest mistake or left to starve if you got sick. Many sailors felt like they were just disposable cogs in the giant, greedy machine of European empires. At the same time, the War of the Spanish Succession had just ended. This meant thousands of privateers, legal pirates hired by governments to attack enemy ships, were suddenly out of a job. These were skilled, hardened sailors with a taste for adventure and very few legal options. So, what did they do? They kept on doing what they knew best, plundering ships. But this time, they weren't doing it for a king or queen. They were doing it for themselves. They needed a base, a place to call home, far from the reach of admirals and governors. They found it in Nassau. The island of New Providence was a perfect pirate haven. Its harbor was too shallow for the massive warships of the European navies, but deep enough for the pirates' nimble sloops. The island itself had been largely abandoned by the British, leaving a power vacuum just waiting to be filled. So pirates from all corners of the Atlantic began to flock to Nassau. By around 1706, it had transformed from a sleepy colonial outpost into the bustling, chaotic capital of a pirate empire. Imagine walking through the streets of this new republic. There were no nobles, no aristocrats, no one born into power. Your status was earned through courage, skill, and reputation. It was a true meritocracy where a common sailor could rise to become a feared captain. And this wasn't just lawless chaos. The pirates of Nassau created their own society with its own set of rules. This was the famous Pirate Code. Before setting out on a voyage, the entire crew would gather to draw up their articles. These weren't laws handed down from on high. They were a social contract agreed upon by every man on board. Everyone had a vote, even the captain. In fact, the captain was elected. If he proved to be a coward or a tyrant, the crew could vote him out at any time. Can you imagine a Royal Navy crew trying to vote out their captain? They'd be hanged for mutiny. The code covered everything. It laid out how the plunder would be divided. A captain might get 2 shares, a skilled navigator 1.5, and every other crewman a single, equal share. This was revolutionary. On a merchant ship, the owners and captain took almost everything, leaving scraps for the crew. The pirates believed in a fair day's pay for a fair day's work, even if that work was robbery on the high seas. The code also acted as a form of social security. It specified compensation for injuries sustained in battle. Lose an arm? You'd get a hefty payout from the ship's treasure chest. Lose an eye? You'd get a little less, but still enough to live on. This was a system of care and mutual support that simply didn't exist for ordinary working people back in Europe. Life in Nassau was a constant party, fueled by stolen rum and newfound freedom. It attracted some of the most famous names of the golden age of piracy. Benjamin Hornigold and his protege, a young upstart named Edward Thatchbetter, known to us as Blackbeard, were among the founding fathers. Blackbeard would become the most terrifying pirate of all, using his fearsome image, with lit fuses woven into his massive black beard, to make ships surrender without a fight. Then there was the gentleman pirate, Stede Bonnet. He was a wealthy landowner from Barbados who, for reasons nobody truly understands, abandoned his family and comfortable life to become a pirate captain. He bought his own ship, hired a crew, and sailed to Nassau, though he knew almost nothing about sailing. And of course, you had the infamous trio: Calico Jack, Rackham, Anne Bonny, and Mary Read. Calico Jack was known more for his flamboyant style than his pirating skills. But his story is legendary because of the two women who sailed with him. Anne Bonny was a fiery, independent spirit who left her husband to be with Calico Jack. Mary Read had spent most of her life disguised as a man, even serving in the British Army. Both were as tough and capable as any male pirate on board, challenging every stereotype of the era. For a little over a decade, this pirate republic thrived. At its peak, over 1,000 pirates called Nassau home. Their operations disrupted the vital trade routes of the Atlantic, hitting the British, French, and Spanish empires where it hurt most: their wallets. Sugar, tobacco, and enslaved people, the lifeblood of the colonial economy, were all targets. The pirates saw themselves as freedom fighters, striking back at the oppressive systems that had exploited them. They even flew their own flag, the Jolly Roger, a symbol of defiance that struck fear into the hearts of merchants across the ocean. But it couldn't last forever. The empires were not going to let a gang of rebels challenge their authority indefinitely. The constant pirate attacks were costing them a fortune. So, the British Crown decided it was time to crush the pirate republic once and for all. In 1718, King George I issued a proclamation, a king's pardon. Any pirate who surrendered by a certain date would be forgiven for all their crimes. It was a brilliant move, a classic divide-and-conquer strategy. For those who refused the pardon, there would be war. To deliver this message, Britain sent a man named Woodes Rogers to be the new governor of the Bahamas. Rogers was no stranger to pirates. He was a former privateer himself. He sailed into Nassau Harbor with a fleet of Royal Navy warships, offering the pirates a choice: accept the pardon and return to a lawful life, or face the hangman's noose. The pirate community was split. Many, like Benjamin Hornigold, were tired of the constant risk. They accepted the pardon and even turned pirate hunter, helping Rogers track down their former comrades. But the hardcore rebels, led by the defiant Charles Vane, refused to give in. Vane famously set his own flagship on fire and sent it sailing towards Rogers' fleet, using the chaos to make a daring escape out of the harbor. But Vane's defiance was a last gasp. The tide had turned. Woodes Rogers was determined. He rebuilt the fort, cracked down on lawlessness, and began hunting down the remaining pirates with ruthless efficiency. One by one, the legends were captured. Calico Jack, Anne Bonny, and Mary Read were caught. Stede Bonnet was hanged. Charles Vane was eventually captured and executed as well. And Blackbeard met his end in a bloody battle off the coast of North Carolina. By the end of 1718, the pirate Republic of Nassau was effectively destroyed. The experiment was over, but its legacy lived on. For a brief, shining moment, a group of ordinary, working-class people had created their own society based on principles of liberty, equality, and democracy. They elected their leaders, shared their wealth, and offered each other a safety net that was unheard of at the time. While their methods were violent and illegal, the pirates of Nassau were also pioneers of a radical new way of thinking. They were rebels who dared to imagine a world without kings and masters, a world where they could be in charge of their own destiny. Their republic may have been short-lived, but the stories of Blackbeard, Anne Bonny, and the democratic dream they built in the Caribbean continue to capture our imaginations hundreds of years later. They remind us that sometimes history's greatest heroes are its most notorious villains. Thanks for watching. If you found this story of rebellion and freedom fascinating, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the hidden corners of history. See you next time